Hi there, smart drivers. Tonight we're talking about police, getting pulled over by police, what you need to do, the procedure you need to follow to keep yourself safe and as well keep the police officer safe, and that you may or may not get off with a warning. That's what we're going to talk about tonight. So, police officers being pulled over by police. Unfortunately, this is a contentious topic for some people, and they truly believe that, like driving examiners, they're all bad. There aren't good people out there who are trying to do work and trying to make our roads safer. This is essentially what police are trying to do, is to make our roads safer. All right, for those of you new to Smart Drive Test, my name is Rick August. I was a truck driver in the 1990s, hauled freight between Ontario, Canada, and the United States, mostly east of the Mississippi. I did make it out to the west a few times, but mostly east of the Mississippi. 2006, graduated from the University of Melbourne with a doctorate in legal history. While I was going to university, I drove buses for Greyhound and one of the regional bus lines there in Australia. And in 2015, I started the online YouTube channel in the business. It's been wildly more successful than I could have imagined. And you can check out the full autobiography over at the Smart Drive Test website. All right, stuff to have a look at. The podcast, Pulled Over by Police, and then there is a shorter video which is concise and has the specific information and procedures you need to what you need to do when you get pulled over by a police officer. Okay, levels of policing, and this is levels of policing in the United States. City police, those who operate within a urban setting. So the Cincinnati Police Force, for example, the New York Police Force, which is all over the television, and the LAPD, the Los Angeles Police Force. These are city police. And then we have sheriff's departments, which generally tend to be regional, and sheriffs are elected to that position. State troopers, these generally work on interstates and any crime that is considered within the state jurisdiction. Capitol Police and federal police, these generally work within Washington, D.C. and look after federal crimes under the legislation. So different levels of policing. All of these can pull you over, but mostly with the people that you're going to get pulled over by city police, sheriff's departments, or state troopers in the United States. Unlikely that you'd be pulled over by Capitol Police or the federal police. Okay, origins of traffic laws. Where do traffic laws come from? Okay, a bill, which is a draft of a law, is put forward in Congress and it is debated. And there are a lot of laws in the United States. For example, if the law in the United States that you have to brush the snow off your car, a lot of these come through private bills, and the bills are put forward, they're passed in Congress, and then they are passed through Senate. So this is called a bicameral system, where there are checks and balances, that it goes through Congress, and then it's appraised by Senate, and then it has to be given presidential assent. It's pretty much the same process here in Canada of how bills are passed and how they're made into laws. Except here in Canada, we don't have presidential assent. It has to have royal assent because we are still a constitutional monarchy. So traffic laws are state laws, and in Canada, they're provincial laws. I had a little go at this a couple of weeks ago about that driving should be federal. It should not be state, because everybody gets involved. Everybody's got their finger in the pie. Driving is driving, and it doesn't need to be slightly different with different nuances in every state, all of the 50 states in the United States, the 10 provinces and territories here in Canada. So it should be federal. Power versus authority. Power is unsanctioned abuse. So basically, if police went around shooting people because they thought that they were guilty of a crime, that would be power, and that is unsanctioned abuse. Authority, on the other hand, is steeped in the Constitution, and it is necessary for the purpose of public safety and public order. Imagine if everybody just went out on the roadway and did whatever they wanted to, drove wherever they thought they could, then we would have a complete and utter breakdown of social order. And police are there to help shore up social order when we're driving on our roadways. Okay, the thin blue line. There are a couple of schools of thinking about police. One is that the community gets the police force it deserves. The other thinking, and this tends to be conspiracy theorists, is that police are an instrument of the state, and that the state can do whatever they want and use the police to enforce that will and use force. This is the other piece of police that people have difficulty with, and it is becoming much more there's much more accountability on the part of the police now with everybody having video cameras and whatnot. Okay, public opinions of policing. Traffic violations are order maintenance work. Essentially, what they're trying to do is reduce the number of traffic crashes that we have on our roadways. They're trying to make people more predictable on our roadways by force them to follow laws and issuing tickets. Okay, police cultures. Police tend to be conservative in their dealings with society and life. Okay, I talked about accountability. Where are you? Which part of the town are you in? Are you in a shady part of town? Are you going to get pulled over? Are you driving something with low pros on it, something that's been modified, jacked up? And what state are you in when the officer approaches the vehicle? Are you slumped over? Are you haven't shaved in a couple of days? Are you looking like you may have just robbed the local liquor store? Those types of things. So think about impressions when the officer approaches the car and sees you and whoever else is in the vehicle. Okay, do they have reason to be suspicious? There's all kinds of characteristics and traits and signposts that police officers are trained to look for when they're pulling over vehicles. Okay, the procedure you need to implement when you are pulled over by police, if you're pulled over for a speeding ticket or a violation, some other violation, of those types of things. Okay, stop as soon as you can do safely. All right, if it's not safe to pull off where you are, go to an off-ramp or go to a fuel station, go to a parking lot, pull off on a minor road, those types of things. Tim isn't here tonight, but Tim has told me that if you pulled into a parking lot or a gas station, then generally the owners would come out and be upset about the fact that they were in there issuing a ticket. So if you can pull off on a minor road, that's going to be better. Do not get out of the vehicle. Stay in the vehicle. Keep your hands in sight on the steering wheel. Do not reach for your license or your registration. Do not fossick around under the seats and those types of things. Wait for the officer to approach your vehicle. And if you were in the United States and you have a weapon in the vehicle, indicate to the police officer as soon as they get to the window where the weapon is located in the vehicle and that you have a permit to carry the weapon that is in your vehicle. All right? Okay, don't deny what you did. If the police officer says that you were speeding, the side of the road is not the time to argue with the police officer that you were speeding. If you feel that you weren't speeding, that is what traffic court is for, okay? Don't question the officer's authority. Don't say, oh, you don't have the jurisdiction to pull me over, blah, 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 yada, yada, yada. Because I will tell you, if you begin to be adversarial, confrontational with the police officer, you are not going to get off with a warning. 8 times out of 10 times that I have been pulled over by police officers, I have simply got a warning and told to slow down or do whatever. I haven't been issued with a ticket, okay? Weapons, we talked about that. Follow the officer's instructions, and as I said, what goes around comes around. If you're polite and pleasant with the officer is going to be polite and pleasant with you. Okay, move over laws. This is something that's new in the last 10, 15 years, but if there's a police officer or an emergency vehicle or tow trucks and those types of things pulled over on the side of the road working to help somebody or issuing a ticket or those types of things, you need to slow down to 40 miles an hour. And if you can do safely on a multi-lane road, move over into the left-hand lane. And this is an absolute must on a driver's test. If you don't do this on a driver's test, you will not be successful. Okay, recourse, you're right. Some states, California, for example, if you get a speeding ticket, you have to take a defensive driving course. If you feel that you're just going to pay the ticket and it's not a big deal, just plead guilty and pay the fine. Or you can go to traffic court and you can plead your case in front of a judge, and they will determine whether you were guilty or not guilty. After traffic court, it's pretty tough to appeal the ticket. But, okay, if you get a speed camera ticket, I got one 3 years ago when we drove to Ontario in the province of Saskatchewan. There aren't any points assigned. It's simply a fine. Okay, so this is why there are accusations leveled against speed cameras that they are not improving safety. There's no points, there's no penalties. The insurance company doesn't know. If you simply pay the fine on a speed camera, that's all there is. So in some cases, some instances, it might be just worth your time just to pay the fine and move on with your life. All right, good luck on your driver's test. And remember, pick the best answer, not necessarily the right answer. I was probably pulled over a lot when I was driving truck in the States because I was aggressive and mostly got pulled over for speeding. One time I was in fact pulled over because there was no place to stop. There were no truck stops and those types of things. And if you are driving truck or you're driving a car and you stop somewhere illegally, someplace that you can't stop, pop the hood and then tell the officer that you have something wrong with your car, because it's the universal symbol that there is something wrong with your vehicle, correct? And basically that's what I should have done, was I should have popped the hood on the truck and I should have said, listen, there's, it's overheating. I'm trying to get some water for it and those types of things. But it is what it is. Doris, I'm so scared of getting pulled over. I would probably cry. I don't know whether that'll work or not. They talk about all those reasons that you may or may not get pulled over. And of course, the meme on Facebook, where the woman gets pulled over and she says to the police officer, "Oh, I hear that you don't give speeding tickets to pretty women." The officer continues to write the ticket and he goes, "We don't." So all kinds of funny memes about people being pulled over. Michelle says, going for a driving lesson tomorrow. Hopefully it doesn't rain. Actually, Michelle, it's much better if it does rain and you are learning how to drive in inclement weather and those types of things. So know that. Scott, hello from Illinois. Hello, my friend. Carrie, think the most likely way someone gets pulled over is for speeding. Yes, that's probably the number one reason that you're going to be pulled over. I did get pulled over for contrary to a sign that prohibited left-hand turns years ago when I was driving again. I was driving a limousine, and we went to Toronto to the CNE, the Canadian National Exhibition, a big stadium there, and we made a left turn contrary to the sign, and of course we got pulled over because the police officer was standing right there. In many instances where you have these big events and those types of things, they will have police officers stationed around the event to try and facilitate traffic flow. And if you do something contrary to a sign at that juncture, there's a good chance that you're going to get pulled over in relation, not just for speeding, but for an action contrary to a regulatory sign is why you're going to get pulled over. Elevator, don't deny what you did when you get pulled over. Absolutely. That's the start of the argument, is denying what you did. The side of the road, being pulled over by a police officer, is not the time to debate what you did, okay? That's the purpose of going to court. If you feel that you are not guilty of the offense, then you need to go to traffic court and you need to dispute it in traffic court. And there are people, I talked to my friend Phil, who's a police officer, and he said, there are a lot of people, not a lot of people, but a significant number of people who will spend considerable amounts of money, $1,500, $2,000 to hire a lawyer to go to court and to fight the ticket for them. And in some cases, it's worth your time. Years ago, I got pulled over by police officers. I was speeding. It was, because of the offense, it was 3 points on my license and the cost of the fine. And some people have probably heard this story previously. And there was an organization in Ontario at the time where I could pay them. They would go to court on my behalf and didn't get the points assigned so long as I paid the fine. So that was basically it. And at the time, I was a commercial truck driver, and I didn't want the points on my fine because it's really tough to get a job if you got a lot of points accumulated on your license. And you have to have a driver's abstract as a commercial driver, and they keep records of all of that stuff. Evan says, if you hear an emergency vehicle approaching, you won't get pulled over. You should stop quickly, but for the purposes of driving tests, you need to stop quickly. For emergency vehicles, yes, you do. The police require you to remain in the vehicle is to ensure your own safety. It is the same for when having hands in the air on the steering wheel, unless they ask for your license. Yes. Do not fossick around in the car. That means don't be looking for stuff in the glove box and in the console and the center console and those types of things. Do not do anything until the officer approaches the window and gives you instructions on what he or she wants you to do. Mary and Ash, I accidentally made a little mistake the other day. I went against a no right turn on a red and then realized what I had done. I was mortified. But that's okay, Marion. You made the mistakes. Nothing happened. It was a learning experience. You're okay. Everybody else is okay. So that's really great. Unique from the UK, never been pulled over quite like the cop shows, though usually drunk drivers. And yes, the unfortunate part is that we still have a fairly high recidivism rate amongst drunk drivers, which means, it's a big word, recidivism, means that people who continually repeat offenders is what recidivism means. And it means that people who are drunks, alcoholics, these are the people that continue to drink and drive. And it's unfortunate that laws aren't more effective in removing these people from our roadways. The problem is, and the challenge to the legal profession, enforcement, police, other people, for people that are alcoholics and continue to drink and drive, is even if you take their license away from them, they continue to drive. And even if you put a breathalyzer in the car, a machine that they have to blow into before it will drive, they figure out ways around these things. But it is pretty stringent, and but the cost of this is prohibitive for people that are driving and whatnot, and the cost of your insurance and whatnot. So we could do another presentation on traffic safety, drinking and driving, and those types of things. But again, for those of us who don't drink and drive, smarter, safer drivers, being on the roadways, what time of the week are we most likely to encounter drunk drivers? That is going to be Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday night, or not so much Sunday nights, but Saturday nights. After 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock at night, if you're out on the roadways, this is the time that you're going to encounter drunk drivers on the roadway. So again, more space between you and other vehicles on the roadway to keep yourself safe. Scott, I got pulled over for not using my turn signal 100 feet from the turn. Interesting. And Scott, did they issue you a ticket or did you just get a warning? Doris, my friend, once pulled over onto the left side of the road. Oh boy, was the officer mad about that. Okay, yes, they would be. Definitely not safe. It's not safe on the side of a highway, on the side of an interstate. We'll talk about pulling over on someplace safe, and that'll help you keep yourself safe and the police officer as well. Talking about tailgaters, okay, Evan, even as an experienced police officer makes mistakes. One mistake is letting you go like a crossing guard when it put others in danger. Crossing guards may also make mistakes. We all make mistakes. Evan, absolutely, no doubt. Michelle, I went driving with my mom and this car kept driving up on my rear, so I started feeling nervous, so I pulled over and let the car pass. There was only 3 cars within the hour that I was driving. Okay, yes, tailgating. People have an issue with vehicles behind them tailgating. Now, Michelle, were you driving the posted speed limit? Because if you were, that's probably the reason that they were tailgating you. It's one of the forms of communication on our roadways. It's part and parcel of social driving, that when you're driving the posted speed limit, other people tailgate you to tell you that, in fact, you need to drive faster. And then often what happens, the person in front will slow down to retaliate against the person who's tailgating them. And you just kind of have this cat and mouse thing going on where nobody's winning the argument, and it's basically a futile argument. Elevator says, I have seen police officers take radar, and yes, oftentimes they will do radar, especially for speed traps. And what happens in terms of radar is one officer will be up the road a couple of miles. They will be doing the radar, and then they'll be radioing to their mates down the road, and they'll be saying car such and such, red car, license plate, this and that. And then you'll get pulled over 2 miles down the road. So that's often what happens with speed traps and those types of things. So know that as well. Sorry, Doris, we don't have to slow down to 40 kilometers an hour even on the highway when the police officer has pulled someone over. Yes, you do, Doris. And it's not 40 kilometers an hour. It's 40 miles an hour. It's 60 kilometers an hour for us here in Canada. Which province are you in, Doris? Evan, when turning left from a main road onto a side road where you can't turn right, should you position in the middle of the intersection? I'm sure that similarly. Left turns, Evan, I advocate that you wait at the edge of the intersection. When you see your gap coming, the other car, and there's a gap behind that car, then move straight into the intersection and then turn. That way you're going to expedite your turn. You're going to move faster through the intersection than you do if you pull into the intersection and try and get going from a dead stop. Raymond, I passed my CDL road test today. I got my CDL license now. That is awesome, Raymond. Congratulations on passing your CDL license there. Do you have a job lined up? That's what I was going to ask you. Or in Canada, we call it an AZ license. Okay, so you're in Ontario, you have an AZ license. Yes. Ontario likes to be a little bit different. It's like New York in the US. Ontario is like that in Canada. It likes to be different. Everybody else calls it a Class 1 with an air brake endorsement, whereas Ontario is an AZ. So there you go. Skinner, Rick, can you talk about focusing more on looking down the road when driving and not the lines? Yes. And here's an interesting thing about that, Skinner, in terms of looking farther down the road, and your car will go where you're looking. Hyundai, maybe it's Toyota as well, but Hyundai, and this was an issue when I left Australia in 2005, was car manufacturers putting the blinkers of the car down on the bumper. Why would they do that? Because it forces you, as the person following the car, to look down at the roadway, which is not where you want your eyes to go. You want your eyes to go forward. You want the blinkers up higher, not down at the bottom. Who has one of those new Hyundais? And I know there's another auto manufacturer that's doing it as well, where they're putting the blinkers down on the bumper. It's dumb. It's like the idea some years ago they had in Toronto on the 401 highway, where they put chevrons on the roadway to indicate following distance between you and the vehicle in front of you. Great. Now we're looking down at the roadway instead of looking far down the road and trying to determine what traffic's doing in front of us and being proactive in our driving. Now we're being anything but proactive. Excuse me, Eric, don't deny what you did, but if you do not believe you did it, don't admit what they said you did either. If you want to go to traffic court, as they will use what you say against you in court, yes. Very short answers. Yes, no, thank you, sir, have a good night, those types of things. Sometimes they'll start engaging in conversation, those types of things, but short answers. If you don't agree with what the police officer, the ticket that the police officer is issuing you, again, you have to sign the ticket. There's a place on it for you to mark guilty, not guilty, and to say that you want to go to court. So know that in terms of a ticket. I've noticed a couple of cars with the indicators down on the bumper. You can't always catch it straight away. Yes, Marion, it's crazy. I don't know why auto manufacturers are doing this. I mean, there was a huge debate about this when I left Australia, because there were some auto manufacturers down there that were doing the same thing, putting the blinkers down on the bumper. Crazy. Marion, yeah, still the tail end of it. This thing is refusing to go away, and both Scout and Burn, both my kids have it as well, and they're just like coughing, fluey, those types of things. Plush, got my permit a week or two ago. That is awesome. Congratulations, my friend. What did you do to celebrate getting your learners? Awesome, awesome. Rawson, in the U.S., the speed limit is called miles per hour. Yes, it is. The United States is still imperial, despite the rest of the world being in metric. They're holding out in the United States. Michelle, my son was driving and he came up on ice and put on the brakes and ended up in the ditch. I told him never to put on the brakes or just steer the direction you want to go. Yes, absolutely. Because applying the brakes when you get on slippery conditions is just going to make it worse for you. So you need to keep those wheels rolling in order to have traction, because as soon as they lock up, you're not going to have traction anymore. Corey, next, maybe how to avoid this, getting pulled over. The point is that, and this is one of Tim's sayings. Tim is a retired RCMP officer, Royal Canadian Mounted Police here in Canada. It is our federal police force. A lot of the provinces have hired the RCMP as their provincial police force. Quebec still has its own police force. Ontario still has its own police force. But for the remainder of the provinces, I'm pretty sure they've all contracted in on the RCMP. Now, how to not get pulled over. And Tim is a retired police officer. The nail that's sticking up is the one that gets hammered. So if you are weaving in and out of traffic and you are speeding and you're passing everybody else on the roadway, you're the vehicle that's going to get pulled over. And yes, there are speed traps, okay? And there are times, they're waiting for you. And, I was in Arkansas years and years ago when I was driving truck in the 1990s, and the police officer was waiting. They were doing a speed check, and I was in a group of 3 trucks, and we were in a 55. I think we were doing 65, 68 miles an hour. And I'm like, yeah, we're going. Of course, I was at the back of the pack. I was the one that got pulled over. I was the one that got the speeding ticket. I did want to say to the police officer, I'm like, well, they were all speeding too, but the police officer can only pull over one vehicle at a time, and I was the one that got pulled over, right? Because I was at the back of the pack. So there you go. And my friend Tim is here, Drive Smart BC. We were just talking about you, Tim, about the nail that sticks up is the one that gets hammered, and getting pulled over for speeding and those types of things. Because one of the smart drivers here asked how not to get pulled over by police. I don't think that's possible. I think sometime there's just a time that you're going to get pulled over. You're not paying attention. You do something goofy. You get pulled over by police. I call them pick me up drivers. Pick me drivers. That's funny. Awesome. And my friend Big Mac Sam is here. Big Mac Sam is a driving instructor in the Bronx. Say hi to Big Mac Sam. And as well, Tim, Drive Smart BC. If you're in the province of British Columbia and want to know anything about traffic laws, you want to know anything about road safety, policing, not instrumental, but pivotal court cases, anything to do with traffic safety, head over to Drive Smart BC as well. There's a forum there, excellent forum that you can participate in and talk with other road safety specialists. So check out Drive Smart BC if you live in the province of British Columbia. Epic, my friend, I wanted to ask you about the law, because I know there's some laws in the United States where they're put forward by private citizens, and the one that snow has to be removed from your vehicle, because I know you've quoted this a few times in the comments. What is the law called that you have to remove snow from your vehicle? Because I know that there's some of these put forward. Marion, that is always my concern when traveling with traffic flow. If we are all doing the limit, just my luck, will be caught. Generally, Marion, when I'm talking about speeders and they're going to get you as a speeder, traffic flow, there is a tolerance in terms of how much you're allowed to go over. If you're doing 5 to 10 kilometers an hour, now I'm saying this loosely, 5 to 10 kilometers an hour over the speed limit, you're not going to get pulled over. However, as I said before, and Tim has said this as well, if you're the one weaving in and out of traffic and you're passing everybody else, you're the person that Tim just said, pick me. You're the person who's going to get the speeding ticket. But if you're just keeping up with traffic flow and everybody's doing the same thing and you're not moving in and out of traffic, weaving in and out of traffic and those types of things, it's less likely that you're going to get pulled over. Okay? Eric, what if you see Amish buggies? Do road rule still applies factors to them? Eric, Amish buggies, the Mennonites, same thing. You treat them as a slow-moving vehicle along the roadways. You have to change lanes, move around them, pass safely, signal, observe correctly, and those types of things. And definitely where, my folks live in Ontario, the Mennonite community, there's a big Mennonite community there. And if you're in the state of Pennsylvania, you're going to be dealing with the Amish and dealing with buggies and those types of things, especially along state roads and rural roads and whatnot. Don't drive crazy. Yeah, so it's not likely, Marion, that you're going to get pulled over. Okay? Elevator, can you pull over for cutting across several lanes at once to make it to your exit? Elevator fan, yes, you can. And I'm sure Tim will contribute to this as well, because that is dangerous driving when you're doing that. Now, if you're moving from one lane to the next lane, to the next lane, to the next lane, and you're doing it consistently, but you're doing it safely, checks, communications, those types of things all in place, then you're going to be fine. But if you just do this cutting across all the lanes of traffic, that's negligent driving. As Tim just said, if you're driving alone, you take your chances. If you stand out from the group, you will get picked. Exactly. It's the same thing with the road here, between Vernon and Kelowna, where I live. The speed limit on that roadway is 90 kilometers an hour, which is crazy because it's a two-lane it's a multi two-lane, 4 lanes in each direction. No, 2 lanes in south. It's 4 lanes. There we go. And everybody is driving 100, 105 kilometers an hour on that roadway. So they're all, 5 to 10 kilometers an hour above what the posted speed limit is. Ross, you can get pulled over for running a red light and stop signs. Yes, you can. Absolutely. Because that is action contrary to the Highway Traffic Act. So anything that's contrary to the Highway Traffic Act is a violation, and you can be pulled over and ticketed for that. Epic, in some places of the United States, there would be an active police officer. I found school zones and entering towns. It might be helpful for you to get an app that warns you of potential speed traps. And potential speed traps, interesting, Google will warn you of speed traps. If you are on Google and you are in Google Maps and you're planning a route, they will tell you where the speed traps are, because 3 years ago when I was planning the route to Ontario, when we were driving there were speed traps on Google Maps. So Google Maps now is also warning you of where speed traps are, right? But police are clever. And as I said to you, they will have one police officer working the radar, and they'll be a couple of miles up the road, and then you'll go past, you get dinged, they radio down to the rest of their mates, and this car, it's a red Chevy, license plate such and such, and they pull you over and they give you a ticket. So you don't necessarily know whether you've been dinged until you're being pulled over and you actually got, the radar actually got you a couple miles back up the road. The lemming defense, everybody else was doing it. Awesome. I love that, Tim. Love that. Think you were right. They look out for speeders more often in certain areas like school zones and going into small towns. Yes, they do. Exactly what Epic was saying there. If you're coming into a small village or a town off a highway and you've been zooming down the highway at 60 miles an hour, right? And that's the speed limit, 60 miles an hour, 100 kilometers an hour. And then you come into town, there's that transition space, right? There's a sign that says 30 miles an hour ahead. Between that sign and the 30 miles an hour sign, that's your transition. That's where you need to get your vehicle down to 30 miles an hour. And for many drivers, they don't look at the controls on their vehicle and they don't get it down to 30 miles an hour or 50 kilometers an hour in that transition, because there is a transition space there. And exactly what Epic said, this is the place where police sit, and this is the place where they will ticket you, because it's not safe once you get into the village or the town for you to be doing 60 kilometers an hour, 70 kilometers an hour, 80 kilometers an hour, which is, 40, 50, 60 miles an hour. It needs to be safe. Tim says, generally the laser operator should be able to see the pullover spot. This ensures that the correct vehicle has been stopped. Excellent. And they have a space down here, Tim. We know where they sit at the bottom of the hill here on the highway, and there's the other piece about it is that there has to be somewhere, and Tim will probably corroborate what I'm saying here, is that there needs to be some place safe where they can pull the speeding vehicles over and they can issue a ticket, right? Because it can't be dangerous. It can't be like on the side of the interstate or something like that, right? It needs to be off on an off ramp or some other place, and this is one of the places on the highway there. There's an intersection there, and they can get them pulled off on the side of the road, and that's where they can issue tickets. Sierra, if you are not speeding, you have very little to be concerned about. However, police are given the ability to stop any vehicle traveling on a highway. Be aware of the definition to check for sobriety. Sierra, there are, and Tim will be able to tell me this because my mate Phil was telling me this the other day. They have to have reasonable cause to pull you over. They can't just pull you over because they think maybe you might be drinking. Police officers, despite their ability to pull you over, they have to have reasonable cause to pull you over. They can't just pull you over on the side of the road and do a check because they feel like it or they're bored or those types of things. So, proper license, registration, insurance, and safety compliance. Yes, all those things have to be in place. Elevator fan, don't resist the officer if you are getting arrested, or else the police could taser you. Yes, it's generally accepted practice that you are not controversial with the police because it can get ramped up very quickly. All right, if you are controversial, you are adversarial, you do anything contrary to what the police officer asks you to do, you can find yourself in handcuffs pretty quickly, and it can escalate very quickly. Do not question the officer's ability to pull you over and those types of things. And again, repeating, if it's at night, Turn the light on in the car so that the officer can see you. Keep your hands on the steering wheel. Do not be reaching for anything in the vehicle. And for those of you in the United States, if you have a weapon in the vehicle, indicate to the officer that you have a weapon in the vehicle. Indicate where it is. Indicate that you have the proper paperwork. You have a permit to have that weapon in the vehicle. All of this information is going to make the situation less volatile, okay, because it can get volatile. Eric, what does it feel like to get tased? Somebody putting electricity through your body. It is not fun. It's going to take you down. Sierra, reasonable cause is not required. They can arbitrarily stop you for any of those reasons. Yeah, but it's not, Sierra, it's not arbitrary. They have to have a reason. If you're pulled over and it goes to court, the officer has to demonstrate to the court that they had reasonable cause for pulling you over. They cannot just arbitrarily pull you over, despite what, conspiracy theorists like to put forward and those types of things. They have supervisors. They have courts. They can be reprimanded. They can be disciplined, and they can't do that. Tim says you can be stopped at time to ensure that you are licensed, insured, mechanically fit, and sober. Random sobriety tests are allowed as a reasonable charter infringement. And yes, but random sobriety tests. I think I was telling this story a couple of weeks ago. I'm just trying to remember the story that Phil told me about pulling this woman over. So my friend Phil was here in town, pulled this woman over for no seatbelt. So he was across from a bottle shop, one of these independently owned liquor stores here in town. So the vehicle went past, wasn't wearing her seatbelt, went into the liquor shop, went into the store, bought something, came back out, and then he pulled her over for no seatbelt. So while he's pulling her over, he's smelling something that he thought was probably alcohol. So he issues a test for alcohol drinking and driving and blows a funny code. And he's like, well, that's really weird. I've never seen that code before. So, of course, he's got two machines in the car in case one is defective. So he goes and gets his other machine, blows another weird code, and he looks the code up, and the code is that alcohol in the mouth. And essentially what the code says is that she went into the liquor store and bought a bottle of whiskey, came back out, got in the car, opened the bottle of whiskey up, and took a swig of alcohol before she started driving again. So that's essentially what the code was telling him. Now he's kind of befuddled and muffled about what's going on. He can't figure out what's going on with his breathalyzers. So he calls another police officer because he's going to do a third breathalyzer. Finally, he comes back, gets another breathalyzer. And again, it shows the same code that she took alcohol in her mouth. And so he's talking to the woman, he's trying to figure out what's going on in terms of the being pulled over and alcohol and those types of things. And the woman says, well, can it be hairspray? He says, what do you mean hairspray? And so she pulls out the hairspray and she says, well, I hate to admit this, and my boyfriend thinks I'm a little weird, but I take the hairspray and I spray it in my mouth because I like it. I like the fizziness of it. And so they're looking at the contents of the hairspray, and it turns out that there's alcohol in the hairspray, which is affecting the breathalyzer reading on the machine. So that's what's going on with it. And so she wasn't drinking. She was spraying this hairspray in her mouth, which was causing a weird reading on the breathalyzer. So there we go. Big Mac Sam, my niece will graduate from the police academy on April 3rd. I can't believe she's chose that career. That'll be interesting, Sam. You'll be able to tell us some interesting stories. Tim, police are no longer required to have a reasonable belief that you have alcohol in your body to demand a breath test. Okay. Is that just here in BC, Tim, or is that Canada-wide now? Instruments, not machines. We had to add $1 to the kitty every time we used the M word on the breath testing technician course. Instruments, not machines. Okay. How did they distinguish the difference between an instrument and a machine? Because, okay, instrument. Because the thing about a breathalyzer is it has moving parts. Does it not? That would suggest to me that it's more a machine. Tim said, stupid woman. Well, you know, we all have our little quirks. That's just a little weirder than most, you know, because I like the fizziness of the hairspray in my mouth. Weird. Dixie says there's also alcohol in some breads too, LOL. And yeah, somebody was telling me the other day about, what are they called? Poppy seeds, you know. Testing, you have to be drug tested as a CDL driver in the United States. If you're a commercial driver, you drive buses or you drive trucks, you're eating a lot of poppy seeds and those types of things, you can test positive on a drug test. So, you know, I don't know how true that is, but it, you know, it's been made of fun in sitcoms and those types of things. Rawson, and can you get pulled over for failing to use your turn signal? Rawson, it's not likely, but if you're, you know, a police officer is driving behind you and you are continuously not using your turn signal, there's a possibility that you get pulled over for failing to signal appropriately. Tim, you can refuse to sign a ticket here in BC. In fact, an e-ticket does not require a signature. So what happens, Tim, if you refuse to sign the ticket? Is it still issued? Like, is there any repercussions from that? Or is it just all of a sudden that they didn't sign the ticket and they're pleading not guilty on the part of the ticket and are choosing to go to court? Is that what happens when they don't sign a ticket? Okay, Sierra, mandatory alcohol screening in Alberta and recently Saskatchewan, product of Australia, works well to curb impaired driving. If you're driving, you provide roadside samples. Okay, excellent. Tim says breath testing rules are Canada-wide. And yes, it's interesting also the perception of drink driving. Some years ago when I was finishing up graduate school, I applied for this position to be a research assistant. And I went to this person's house and I was sitting there and they were on the phone having a conversation with obviously their insurance adjuster as I was overhearing this conversation. And they had been ticketed for drink driving and they'd been convicted in court. Obviously they went to court and they were fighting it in court, but they had been convicted of drink driving and they could not believe the astronomical increase in their insurance premium because they'd been convicted of drink driving. However, you know, they were arguing continuously on the phone with this insurance agent that it was a technical offense and that it wasn't a big deal. And the unfortunate part is many people still, you know, not many people, but some people still believe that drinking and driving is not a big deal. And these are the people, unfortunately, that are continuing to repeat offend in terms of drink driving. And unfortunately, I would like to think that we're beginning to curb the drink driving problem, but in many of these smaller towns and villages and rural communities and those types of things, I don't think that we are. I think that we still have a big problem with drink driving. And this is why I tell you to be careful on Thursday, Friday, Saturday nights if you're driving after 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night, because, you know, you're likely to encounter people that are drink driving and trying to get home from the pubs and bars and other places where they've been consuming alcohol and whatnot. So, and now it's, you know, it's pronounced even, it's worse. The problem has been ramped up even more because of the legalization of marijuana, not only here in Canada, but in also, you know, a lot of states, not a lot of states, but some states in the US as well. So now we have that added issue with driving and driving when you're inebriated on the roadways. Tim says the officer just completes a certificate of service. It essentially says the driver got a copy. Okay, so that's how that goes to court and those types of things. Elevator fan, if you cause a crash, you can get a ticket. Elevator fan, it actually can be much worse than that. If you cause a crash, you can be found liable and you can have to pay penalties and recompense to the people, not recompense, but monies to the injured parties, because once the trial lawyers, once the personal injury lawyers get involved, it gets very interesting after that point. Carmen, one time while practicing driving, I did something that I shouldn't have done, and I saw red and blue flashing lights behind me and then pulled over to the side of the road. The cop went past me. Okay, so it wasn't you. Yeah, that's always interesting when that happens, is that, you know, you think you're the one being pulled over, then they go somewhere else. Sam, there's currently a bill which proposes lowering the blood alcohol content from 8 to 5, but this bill is still in active stages. Yeah, and it's probably going to pass because a lot of places are going to 0.5 as opposed to 0.8. Too early for a turn? Probably not, elevator fan. Big Mac Sam, there have been calls from legislators and advocacy groups to lower the blood alcohol limit, but the legislation is not being passed. Interesting. Yeah, it's legislation, and making things law is a long process. All right, so I want to show you this on on Twitter here, and it's running a yellow light, and the person was pulled over. They were driving a Tesla. They had a dash cam in the vehicle. I guess Tesla, this comes standard with Tesla cars, that you have a dash cam in the car. And he showed the police officer the video footage, and the police officer didn't issue him a ticket for driving a red light. Personally, I think that the driver did in fact run a red light, because as you'll see in the video footage, it's only halfway through. The driver's only halfway through, and then the video cuts off. Okay, the driver's still in the intersection when the right light turns red. But it'll be interesting to see what your perception is of this. Okay, I'll make it bigger here. There we go. And so that's basically it. So you can see here at the beginning, I'll just stop it here. The driver is at least 2 car lengths back from the crosswalk. So this car is in the intersection. The light is yellow. I'll slow it down here a little bit for you. So the driver moves up. The light is completely yellow. The driver goes through. And the driver's waiting down. The police officer's right here. The police officer walks out, gives him a ticket. So that's essentially it. Your thoughts on that, of whether the... And Tim says it can be illegal to fail to stop for a yellow light, and that was my thinking of it exactly, is that the driver, and then the driver, of course, he's on Twitter, everybody's commenting, saying that it's not illegal, those types of things, and I'm thinking, he was in the intersection, he could have stopped, and he's like, well, I wasn't going to risk being rear-ended, and I'm like, well, the cars behind you are coming to a stop because the light turned red when you were in the intersection. And it's one of those arguments that is ongoing on social media about whether something is legal or illegal, and there's no clear answer in the legislation. This is something that personal injury lawyers and trial lawyers get involved with if something happens. In this case, nothing happened. It's a victimless crime, and that's the way people look at it. It's a technical offense. It's kind of like some people's perception of drinking and driving. I didn't get caught. Nobody got hurt. It's a victimless crime. So the question becomes, did the driver run the red light? In my professional opinion, the driver did in fact, but the drivers of the conviction that they did not run the red light. And not only did they not run the red light, they have evidence, video evidence, to prove that they didn't. So, interesting query in terms of traffic safety. Tim says you have to be able to show that it was unsafe to stop. Yeah, there was no reason that driver couldn't have stopped in that sense. I mean, that driver just kind of rolled through the light. That's so obvious from the video footage that the driver didn't even attempt to slow down. They were 2 vehicle lengths back from the intersection. The light was solid yellow. It would be interesting to see more of the footage from previous, another 30 seconds starting of the footage to see when the light actually turned yellow, because you can't tell when the light turned yellow from that video footage. The car he's at least 2 vehicle lengths back from the crosswalk. There was no reason that he couldn't have got the vehicle stopped. He was participating in social driving, doing what everybody else was doing. But then he got on Twitter, posted on Twitter, and there was a huge argument, and everybody was involved. And I was kind of like, yeah, it's kind of the pig and mud thing. Yeah. After a while, you realize that the pig likes it, and you're not going to win. So, and this is what happens with a lot of people who are involved in social driving and get speeding tickets and those types of things. And Tim, I'm certain that over your years of policing traffic and pulling people over, that you got all kinds of people who were telling you that they were right and they didn't do anything wrong and whatnot. Ross and I still call shoulder checking blind spot check, and yes, it's one and the same thing. And in Australia and Britain and parts of Europe, they call it a head check. So different language for the same thing. Cario, the risk of a crash is an important reason to have a good insurance policy. Yes, And interesting enough, I was reading something on LinkedIn today that the Ontario government is offloading more responsibility onto drivers to have better insurance, because the insurance coverage, there's a lot of omissions in the insurance if you get injured in a car crash. For example, you will not have compensation for lost pay. You will not be able to hire maid services for somebody to come in and clean your house and those types of things. Oh, sorry, Sam. Drive Smart BC. That's Tim. That's Tim. Yeah, so you probably want to top up your insurance and get better insurance in case that you are, what's the word I'm looking for? That you're injured in a car crash and you're convalescing and you need money while you're convalescing. So that's what you need to do in terms of looking at your insurance policy to keep yourself safe in the event that you're in a crash. And we've talked about that in the province of British Columbia and those types of things. I know for new drivers that insurance is incredibly expensive, right? And you can't possibly be thinking about anything beyond public liability and public damage, right? Which is the basic insurance, PL and PD. And that can be really expensive, right? So you start looking into vehicle theft, fire and theft, and then you start looking into collision insurance. You know, once you put collision insurance on your vehicle, the problem with that is that it doubles your premium. And collision insurance repairs your vehicle if you get into a crash. So for example, you go down the road, you lose control of your vehicle, you crash into a utility pole and you write off your vehicle. If you have collision insurance, then insurance will pay for it. Now, for those of you trying to look for less expensive insurance, one of the ways that you can do that is to purchase your vehicle outright. So if the vehicle's $3,000 and you pay $3,000, you don't have a loan on it, then you're not going to have collision insurance, because oftentimes if you buy a vehicle and you take out a loan on it, the company that issues the loan oftentimes will want collision insurance on your vehicle. So that's going to double the price of your insurance on your vehicle. Okay. Michelle, my balance, I cannot stand on one foot for long, so I cannot do the one leg thing, but pass everything else. Do I get my license pulled? Michelle, I can't say that I've ever been in a license test where they've asked you to stand on one leg for any length of time. Maybe in a sobriety test, but hopefully you'll never be pulled over for one of those. Carmen, what should I do if I get nervous while driving or I need confidence? Carmen, remember the mantra: I am a good driver. I am driving well. Okay. And if it gets too bad, the anxiety gets too bad, pull over someplace safe, take a moment, walk around the vehicle, get your composure back. But, keep that mantra up, right? I am a good driver. I am driving well. Carrie, it is deemed at fault for a car accident. I believe a person gets less compensation from insurance. It's going to depend on insurance. It's going to depend on what kind of insurance your state or province has, whether you have no fault insurance or those types of things, who they deem to be at fault and whatnot. So there's a lot of factors involved in terms of what happens in the aftermath of a crash. Okay, Corey says he very well easily could have and should have stopped, just short of running a red, in my opinion, worthy of a warning. Yeah, but unfortunately in the comments, if you read the comments of that post on Twitter, and after the live stream, I'll put the link down in the description there. This person was not, they didn't learn anything, because as far as they were concerned, they had been exonerated by the video in the dash cam footage. And had something happened, had trial lawyers got involved, had it gone to court, had there been a case for, personal injury, tort law, those types of things, and people like me get involved, expert witnesses, it would have been, you're at fault. The light was solid yellow, and you still entered the intersection. So, unfortunately, nothing happened. So there we go. Didn't even bother trying to even stop. No, he didn't. Carmen, this is off topic. What should I do if I need more confidence? Okay, we answered that question. Excellent. Marion, he didn't even bother to stop. No, you're absolutely right. He didn't bother to stop. Elevator fan, can you get pulled over for flashing your high beams at left lane squatters? I don't think so, elevator fan. It's hard to prove that you were flashing your headlights at left lane squatters and those types of things, or honking or losing your patience or whatnot. So all of that is going on. Okay. Yes, definitely, Corey. He was definitely unapologetic. As I said, he was of the conviction that he was in the right, and he had video testimony to prove it, and he felt completely exonerated from any crime that he felt that he committed. He didn't even begin to visit the question that maybe he was wrong. He argued with every comment that was posted underneath that video on Twitter, and I find that interesting. And sometimes I want to go in and say something, but I just say to myself, no, they're not going to listen to what I'm saying. They believe what they believe. They're of that conviction. They're completely steeped in the ideology of social driving. They believe they're right. They've got evidence to prove they're right, and they're not gonna challenge that conviction at all. It doesn't matter what anybody else says. Tim, high beams are for situations where we're more than 150 feet away from another vehicle. Yes. Eric, Carmen, each day is a positive day. God be with you. Excellent. Thank you for that, Eric. Carrie, when the light is solid yellow, sometimes one has to go through it at the point of no return. Yes, if you are right on top of the intersection, Carrie, then you do have to go through it, no doubt. But this was not the case in this video. He was at least 2 car lengths back from the intersection, probably more when the light turned yellow. There was no doubt in my mind that he could have got the vehicle stopped. Tim, the last one I pulled over flashing headlights was prohibited driver. DUI. Yeah, duh. Don't do it. Yeah. And that's the interesting part. The point that Tim made there was the fact that oftentimes these people get pulled over for flashing their lights or doing something goofy. They have a taillight out, all those kinds of goofy things, and then it finds out that, as Tim said, they have a prohibited license or they have outstanding tickets or whatnot. In the United States, it's parking tickets, not so much here in Canada, but parking tickets in the United States and other things. So all kinds of goofy things going on. So, all right, we're going to leave it there for tonight. You want to say hi? Come here. Oh, come here. There you go. You can say hi. He wants to go outside. He's not so little anymore, is he? You want to look right in the camera right there? Right there? You're like, what are we doing? Where is Striker? Striker is right here. Yeah, he's full on now. Full on. He's going to say hi? There we go. Okay, he's not very talkative. Okay. There we go. Comfy? All right, so if you had a test in the last couple of weeks, congratulations on passing your test. If you have a test coming up in the next week or so, good luck on that. And remember, pick the best answer, not necessarily the right answer. Have a great night. Bye now.